Good morning, welcome back to the biology online class. This is the second part of the respiratory system lesson. In today's class, we are going to learn the kinds of respiration in detail. So there are two different kinds of respiration noted in almost all organisms, all respiring organisms. They are aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, which is a very common method of respiration in higher organisms like plants and animals, oxygen is compulsory for this kind of respiration. And by the end of this kind of respiration, by the end of aerobic respiration, carbon dioxide is released as a product. By this kind of respiration, food molecule or glucose molecule will get completely oxidized. The food molecule will be split into water and carbon dioxide, and it would be releasing too much amount of energy. The maximum amount of energy is released by the end of aerobic respiration. So one molecule of glucose, in other terms we can say that as 180 grams of glucose, because the molecular weight of glucose C6H12O6 becomes 180 grams. So one molecule of glucose releases 38 ATP molecule, or in terms of kilojoules, it is 2980 kilojoules of energy. So this is the maximum amount of energy that one molecule of glucose can yield. So by the end of aerobic respiration, complete oxidation of glucose happens, which releases 38 ATP molecules, which is very necessary for you to learn. Now you need to look at your text, page number 125. There are equations. I need you to learn the equations as it is, both the equations. The first one talks about energy and the second one talks about how this energy is being distributed. In the first equation, you can see that there is 686 kilocalories of energy is released. And in the second one, you can see that 38 ATP plus 420 kilocalories of energy, which is released as heat energy. So these 38 ATP molecules are stored in the plant for its further use. Some amount is released in the form of heat energy. So now I request you to think about the law of thermodynamics. Only 10%, only a very little amount can be stored up by the organisms, and the rest will be released at each and every tropic level. So you need to learn both the equations. You have to learn both the equations. That's very, very important. And now we are going to learn the steps of aerobic respiration. So the first step of aerobic respiration is glycolysis. And this glycolysis, one more important thing to know about glycolysis, this is the common step of respiration which occurs in both aerobes and anaerobes. Glycolysis is a common step which occurs in both aerobes and anaerobes. So what is glycolysis? What does the term mean? Splitting up of glucose. So this or lysis is killing of glucose. So in this glycolysis, one molecule of glucose will be split into or converted into two molecules of pyruvic acid. That's what it termed as glycolysis. Glucose is being killed and that will be producing pyruvic acid. And this glycolysis occurs in the cell cytoplasm. That doesn't require any special organelle. Glycolysis occurs in the cell cytoplasm. And it's an enzymatic reaction. It's not a simple reaction. It's just it involves nearly 10 major steps of reaction. And all these reactions require their own specific enzymes. And all these enzymes are present in the cell cytoplasm. And this is the common step, as I said before, this is a common step. So this occurs in the cell cytoplasm, and by the end of glycolysis, only 2 ATP molecules are produced. By the end of glycolysis, when one molecule of glucose converted into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, by the same time it would be releasing 2 molecules of ATP, which is a very less amount of energy release. And this pyruvic acid in aerobic respiration, we are learning about the steps of aerobic respiration. So this pyruvic acid will be moving into a special organelle called mitochondria, where the further oxidation of pyruvic acid happens. In that, one major step is Krebs cycle. Remember, right? So this pyruvic acid oxidation happens inside the mitochondria, which will be releasing the rest of the energy. Totally, I said totally 38 ATP molecules are produced. Only 2 ATP molecules are produced by the end of glycolysis, and the rest 36 ATP molecules will be produced inside mitochondria. In Krebs cycle, energy rich compounds are produced, not ATP. Energy rich compounds are produced, and that energy rich compounds are converted further into ATP, which is also occurring in mitochondria. So the carbon dioxide will be released when the molecule of pyruvic acid is completely oxidized. Carbon dioxide will be released, and this carbon dioxide will diffuse out of mitochondria and then later out of the cell as a product of respiration. So this kind of reaction is very similar in plants and animals. Okay, this is very similar in plants and animals. Then what happens in anaerobes? Here you can see that one sentence, anaerobes. Now we can learn anaerobic respiration in detail. So anaerobic respiration means the respiration which doesn't require oxygen at all, or that can happen in the absence of oxygen too. So there may be some places where oxygen is very zero or oxygen is not at all present. For example, like under the seabed, where the oxygen level is too low, or in the crevices of rocks where maybe oxygen level is too low. So in those regions, or inside an organism, for example like inside our gut, tapeworm is there. So that tapeworm cannot receive oxygen. So that tapeworm is surviving as an anaerobe. Okay, so there are some animals or some plants lives in an oxygen free environment, and there are some organisms, even though they are living in a normal environment, they doesn't require oxygen. For example, like most of the bacteria, they can survive without depending on oxygen. They won't mind whether oxygen is present or not. So that organisms are termed as anaerobes. So these anaerobic organisms doesn't require oxygen for their survival. So what happens at the time of respiration in these organisms? Glycolysis, I said glycolysis is a common step because glycolysis doesn't require oxygen. Glycolysis doesn't require oxygen for their reactions. So in anaerobic organisms, the glucose molecule will be converted into pyruvic acid by the end of glycolysis. Along with pyruvic acid, they will be producing 2 ATP molecules, and then this pyruvic acid in the cytoplasm itself, they will be converted into ethanol or lactic acid. If the pyruvic acid is converted into ethanol, you all know the molecular formula of ethanol. What is it? How many carbons are there? It's C2H5OH, right? So how many carbons are there in ethanol? 2 carbons. Pyruvic acid is a 3 carbon compound. In pyruvic acid, 3 carbon molecules are there. In 3 carbon are there. Okay, so this pyruvic acid, when it is converted into ethanol, 1 molecule of carbon will be released in the form of carbon dioxide. So when ethanol is produced as a byproduct in plants, a molecule of carbon dioxide will also be released. And there is no energy release after glycolysis in anaerobes. Please note down all these things. In glycolysis, 2 ATP molecules are released, and that is the only energy release happening in anaerobes. When pyruvic acid is converted into ethanol, which occurs in the cell cytoplasm in anaerobes, there is no energy release, but only one carbon dioxide molecule will be released. In terms of lactic acid, which happens in animal cells, even in our muscle cells, even in our muscle cells, lactic acid production will be there. So when pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid in the cell cytoplasm, there is no release of carbon dioxide, and there is no energy formation, there is no release of carbon dioxide too. And I said this happens in our muscle cells too. When we are doing vigorous physical exercise, for example, like you're climbing on you're climbing somewhere, or you're going on trekking, or you're doing swimming, or if you're running fast, or you're doing some vigorous physical exercise where you're involving too much of your muscle cells, like most commonly the athletes used to get that. This lactic acid will be produced when all the cells are not receiving enough oxygen. When the cells doesn't receive enough oxygen, the cell starts to produce lactic acid instead of allowing the mitochondria to take pyruvic acid. In the cell cytoplasm itself, the pyruvic acid will be converted into lactic acid. Without releasing carbon dioxide, the pyruvic acid will be converted into lactic acid. So this lactic acid accumulation in the cells, in the muscle cells, will be immediately causing muscle cramp. You all would have experienced that when you were on your sports day. In our calf muscle, we may get the muscle cramp. In the calf muscles, when you are running or when you are jogging, and even for jogging it may not happen, when you are doing that swimming. So that's all the vigorous kind of physical exercises, right? In the calf muscle or in our upper arm muscle, we may get that. In the forearm, in the upper part of forearm, we may get that cramp. So that muscular cramp is because of too much of lactic acid production. So what do we need to do at that time? We may be feeling fatigue also. This feeling of fatigueness is because of lack of oxygen. So what do we do at that time? Simply, we will be taking rest. We need to lie down in a place and we need to allow ourselves to get the oxygen enough amount. So that condition, which is caused by the accumulation of lactic acid in the muscle cells, and which gives the feeling of fatigue, is called oxygen debt. There is an oxygen deficiency in our body. So what do? Simple relaxation so that the muscle cells will get oxygen enough amount, and this lactic acid will be converted into pyruvic acid, which will later be releasing carbon dioxide. So release of carbon dioxide is very necessary for our cells. So as I said, after glycolysis, in the anaerobic respiration, there is no energy release, and which indirectly shows that this is incomplete oxidation of food, which results in less energy production. So only 2 ATP molecules we are getting by the end of anaerobic respiration. The anaerobic respiration in plants are more different from animals. In plants, for example, like in fungi, ethanol is produced along with carbon dioxide. You all can see this directly by your eyes. What happens in the dough which has been made for bread or in the dosha batter too? while we add yeast in the batter or in a dough, after some time you can see that there will be a foaming effect. It will become very soft, it causes foaming effect, and that is because of the released carbon dioxide. And the heat energy will be very high. You can touch when you're you can do this at your home. Take a spoon of yeast, mix it with sugar solution, keep it aside, or else like warm water you can use. Allow the yeast to develop, multiply. After some time you can notice that it will be producing some foam, or the temperature of the milk or sugar solution what you are using will be a little bit higher. That is because of the production of heat energy. Ethanol will be released. Have you ever smelled a tangy taste in yeast solution? Or there will be a smell of ethanol from the curd? That is all because of ethanol production. Okay, so in plants, when yeast is there, ethanol will be produced. But what happens in animals? In our muscle cells, lactic acid has been produced and there is no release of carbon dioxide, and there is no much heat energy release also. It won't be releasing too much of heat energy. Okay, because it's not complete. This is trying to be complete by releasing carbon dioxide, but this is not at all complete. A 3 carbon molecule is converted into another 3 carbon molecule, so there is no heat energy release. The energy is packed in some other form. That's it. Right? So this is about the two different kinds of respiration. And the next thing what we are going to learn is parts of respiration. Even in the starting of this class I said breathing is just the first step of respiration. It's not respiration. So there are 4 major parts of respiration which we are going to learn in detail in this lesson. So the first part of respiration, and this is the thing we can see in higher organisms including mammals, including what happens in our body. Okay, so the first part is breathing. So breathing is actually a very physical process. There is no biological thing involved in it. It's a very physical process. How does breathing occur? When our lung gets expand, there is a change in pressure inside the lungs when compared with atmosphere. How do the lung get expand? We have a diaphragm at the bottom of our lung, and there are the rib cage muscles, intercostal muscles are there. On the sides of our rib cage there are some muscles which will pull the lungs or the rib cage wide open. You just sit straight. Now everybody, you sit straight, and you can notice that at the time you breathe, the rib cage or the chest box comes out and goes in. When it comes out, the lungs get highly relaxed and there is less pressure inside our chest box, so that automatically from the atmosphere all air molecules will rush into the nose. We don't want to do this spontaneously. We don't want to do this purposefully. It would happen spontaneously, right? So that is a physical process. And the second important part is gaseous transport. So when these gases rush into the nose through the pathway, it reaches the lungs. There in the lungs, gaseous transport occur. How does this gaseous transport occur? When the lungs is filled with gas, which is rich in oxygen and a little bit of carbon dioxide, because it's from atmosphere, right? Major amount of nitrogen will also be there. But our body will be receiving only oxygen. Remember the structure of lungs, which is covered with blood vessels. So when lungs is completely dilated, the blood vessels, capillaries are surrounding there, the oxygen molecule will easily diffuse into the blood vessels. And in the blood vessel, there are some oxygen carriers called hemoglobin, which are having high affinity towards these gases, that will get combined with oxygen, forms an unstable compound oxyhemoglobin. And this oxyhemoglobin will be moving onto the blood. It will be moving on the blood, and that oxyhemoglobin, when it reaches a cell which is lacking oxygen, this oxyhemoglobin will provide the oxygen to the cell. And from the cell, carbon dioxide concentration would be very high. So the free hemoglobin molecules, free hemoglobin means which doesn't have an oxygen on top of it, will be receiving carbon dioxide from the cell, and it comes back to the lungs and it gives back to the lungs. The carbon dioxide molecules are given back to the lungs, so that while we exhale, carbon dioxide will be released. I need you to visually think, you need to virtually think how does oxygen molecules go into the blood. I'll show you videos in future classes, but now you have to think about it a very little. Imagine the structure of lungs, and outside the lungs there will be blood vessels. From the lungs, oxygen is diffused into the blood, and in the blood there is a saucer shaped RBC, and this RBC will capture oxygen. They will be traveling wherever they find a cell in which oxygen content is so less. This saucer shaped RBC will donate that oxygen. Instead, it will get back the carbon dioxide from that particular cell, and when it comes back to the lungs, it will be providing it back. Very right? It's very easy to think about it. And the next part, the third part, is tissue respiration. Now you need to check the cell. Think about the cell which receives the oxygen. The cell membrane is very thin. How does the cell receives oxygen? How does those particular area tissues receive oxygen? Inside those tissues, oxygen content would be very less, and in the blood, oxygen content may be very high. So by natural phenomena, by simple diffusion, the oxygen molecules diffuse into the cells, and the carbon dioxide concentration is very high in the tissues, and that carbon dioxide will simply diffuse back into the blood vessels. So this is also a kind of physical process, physical exchange of gases which occur in the tissue level and also at cellular level. So in this lesson, we are going to learn that in detail, and in the next class, I'll show you videos while we are learning that in detail. So for your cycle test, you are supposed to learn till parts of respiration. You don't want to learn respiratory organ. You have to learn till parts of respiration. Okay, I hope you understood the class. If there is any doubt, you need to message me or call me to inquire about your doubts, to clear your doubts. So your homework today is learn the respiratory system lesson. Nearly some 2 pages I have completed. 3 pages I have completed totally. So you can learn all 3 pages for your cycle test. I hope you understood this. If there is any doubt, message me. Okay. Thank you, kids. Stay safe at home and complete all your work on time. Thank you.